I'm Jake Williams, Statescape's Associate Publisher, and we are here today with Kelsey Nelson, Senior Manager of Product Marketing Solutions with Okta. Kelsey, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jake. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. And Kelsey, it's been an unprecedented and bizarre year so far. The world has changed, and that's certainly clear across the public sector. Just recently, the National Association of State Chief Information Officers released its 2020 State CIO Survey. One of the big takeaways of that survey is really this sort of idea of redefining what the future of digital government will look like. So let's dive into that in this conversation. I think one of the things that I took away from the survey was how state government CIOs are looking for opportunities to collaborate with local governments in their state. What are you seeing in that collaboration realm from your perspective at Okta?
Yeah, I think we're seeing collaboration happening sort of at two levels. And one, initially, when we all were kind of put in a work from home situation very quickly, there's a lot of work within agencies to how do I actually enable my agency workers to collaborate when we can't be in the office anymore. And so there was a lot of work that was spun up. How do we start to certainly deliver collaboration tools? That was absolutely a part of it, but a lot of it is different work streams and work styles, right? Asynchronous meetings, people working potentially from different locations. It's a different muscle to build from a productivity standpoint. And I think as the year has gone on and we've continued to see that there's just a lot of uncertainty and we don't really know how long this is going to last. There's been a lot of work that's happening sort of interagency collaboration at different levels of government and also with public-private collaboration as well. How do I start to work with different entities to start to tackle immediate challenges related to COVID, but also how do we rethink a lot of this in the future? And I think that's been really exciting to see. Not to say we've, it's a bit of a silver lining, we'll say, for all this time.
And so, part of the immediate response to the pandemic was really about delivering a good experience to citizens online because that became sort of the only option. What are you hearing from folks that you work with around delivering great experiences to constituents?
Yeah, and that came up in the NASCIO survey that you just called out, right? This idea of how do we start to deliver better experiences to our constituents was really important to the CIO survey there. And I think there's been a lot of work that had been maybe underway before the pandemic to start to think about digitizing digital services, government services, how do we better reach our constituents? But the pandemic really accelerated that because I can't go in and get my driver's license in person right now, things like that. And so we're seeing a lot of those digital services have really been accelerated as agencies are trying to figure out how can we get a lot of these maybe traditional services through government online. I think I actually had a chat with the leadership from the city of Los Angeles early this week, for example, and how they're talking about this idea of an Angelino ID so they can start to make the experience for their citizens. She actually talked about it as seamless as many of the experiences that you'd see in your private sector life. They mentioned Amazon as an example, but why can't I have that great experience with government? And I think, starting to look at how do we bring these services online? How do we make it easy for our users? One thing she called out too that I think is really an important and powerful part of this conversation is how do I also build better trust with my constituents as a part of doing this? How can I build trust, certainly from an experience standpoint, but also that when you're working with your state and your local government agencies, that they're here to support you across, what is, City of Los Angeles is a great example. It's an extremely diverse community. So how do I build trust with everyone? And I think that comes in a lot of different forms, which is really, really interesting to hear how they're thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting project, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Obviously, the thing in this community, whenever we talk about technology, whenever we talk about the digital government experience, the thing that needs to be a part of it across the board is cybersecurity. How are you advising folks in the public sector to approach cyber when thinking about the digital government services that they're providing both internally to their employees, but also externally to the constituents?
Yeah, and that security piece is really important. We talk about trust. Protecting our citizen data is absolutely critical in that trust conversation. And so I think look at it from two different lenses. So you mentioned the employee side. We're seeing a lot of those agencies maybe needed to in the initial firefighting of COVID, start to spin up, how do I expand my VPN capacity? How do I layer on MFA to my VPN, or maybe to new collaboration tools like video conferencing, which you and I have gotten very familiar with, and I'm sure everyone has. So that was sort of the initial thinking. But as we're starting to really move into this long-term work from home, or really the ability to work in a distributed workforce in the future, how do we rethink those traditional security perimeters? And so we're hearing a lot of agency leaders are looking at projects like Zero Trust, like how do I start to bring together different facets of a modern security stack, identity being, a foundational component of that, marrying that with things like endpoint security and device security to really round out that broader security strategy. Whereas on the constituent facing side and facing employees, there's absolutely that element of security, and layering in things like MFA for maybe financial transactions is one that's come up. But also this idea of protecting against fraud. That's another thing that we're hearing a lot of need from agencies. How do I mitigate fraud in these online services? So, we're working closely with a lot of identity proofing vendors to make sure that we can help enable that great experience for our users that's also protecting all of these constituents and employees.
So I like when we have a conversation like this. I mean, we've been talking about it in the greater context of digital government, but I think we've talked about a couple different ideas, and so I want to wrap it all up and pull it together. How do all of these items that we've talked about kind of culminate in this future idea of what digital government is?
Yeah, I think I love this idea again from some of my earlier conversations this week about building trust with digital government, right? And the role that a lot of this technology acceleration can do to help build trust, and to build trust in government services, in being as user-friendly and as efficient, in making sure that we can help all of the constituents, because really a lot of what we're doing here is supporting our constituents. So how can we do that better? How can we be more efficient? How can we help our government employees accomplish their missions that much better? And so I think really that role of seeing technology and digital government helping to build that trust and to enhance that trust is really where I think we're going. And I think it's an exciting time.
It is an exciting time, and I look forward to keeping the conversation going with you in the future. Kelsey, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks again for having me.